Jim, this isn't in your guys' eyes, is it? In your eyes? No? Okay, good. Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody out there. This is going to be our end of the month, kind of 25th anniversary month that we had for the Atelier. Thank you guys for joining a lot of the YouTubes and the live streams and stuff. But we're going to do one here. It's kind of special where we've got most of the teachers. We don't have everybody because some people had some prior engagements that couldn't make it. But most of the instructors are going to be here working on various things. We've got myself working on a portrait from life. We've got some guys drawing portrait from life. We've got Tom doing a wildlife. We've got Lucas doing some comps for a job he's got coming up, so he'll be doing that digitally. We've got my dad doing a gouache painting illustration. Erik, I think, is going to be, when he's here, is going to be working from life. He should be coming in a little late, but hopefully he'll be here. Oh, Erik's here. Never mind. So Erik's here, so he's going to be doing a little painting as well. You just doing a painting? Yeah. Okay. So enjoy watching us all work. This is kind of what we're known for at the Atelier, is actually live demoing constantly in front of the students as well as on their actual work. It's something I feel extremely strongly about, as far as the way that you really should impart this information is not through verbalization as much as through actual execution in front of the student and on the student's work, so that you can really exemplify and lead by, lead also, step into the leadership role so that the student can actually respect you and respect your abilities. I think all too often in art instruction, the teacher kind of phones it in a little bit and has a tendency to talk theory, maybe talk about the concepts, but never executes, either because it's too daunting to do that, because it is a very difficult way to go. Your credibility is on the line every time you come up to the easel or to the illustration or whatever you're working on. So I just want you to know that I want to thank all these guys for coming and showing up and all their support over the years. And we're like a big family, so it's really quite a special thing to have everyone here doing this. So just enjoy. We're going to be panning back and forth between, we have a camera on most of the work, and then we have a little gimbal that's kind of walking around that'll be also filming. So you'll get a chance to see pretty much everybody working on different stuff. So just enjoy the process. If you have some questions, go ahead and ask them, but we're probably going to try to keep that to a minimum, only because I'm the only one mic'd. We do have a mic going around, but we're kind of short on people as far as having people be able to run around to each and every question that we get. So we'll try to, kind of look through those questions and cherry pick a few of them. So don't get disappointed if yours doesn't get read. It's nothing personal. It's just we don't have the bandwidth to get everybody's questions answered. So what I'm going to do right now is just lay mine in, and I'm laying it in kind of in a traditional manner of just using, you can use a brush to do this. You could use a pencil theoretically. I'm actually using a drawing stump, and I'm just going to sketch in a linear drawing that I will then stain in and start to build up into opacity, and ultimately to finish layers of wet into wet alla prima painting. Very similar to any of the great alla prima painters of the past, although some used more massing in techniques. I'm going to use more linear. I masked one in earlier this morning. I was in this morning's workshop and I did another portrait, so this is my second one of the day. But I just wanted to get my hand kind of warmed up a little bit. Before I always like to do that if I can before I demo, but a lot of times you just have to come in cold and let it roll. So again, at this stage of my painting, I'm going to be working on, again, spatial relationships using the Riley abstraction, using the planes of the head, which is the Asaro head for me. I prefer those planes. I think those are dovetail nicely with the Riley method, seeing as how John was, and Asaro was originally a Riley student. So he built that head off of the planes of, or the planes of the head off the Riley rhythms. So that's another little handy tidbit of information. So, and it's probably one of the nicer ones I've seen out there. And I'll also use skull information. So I'm drawing upon those three major areas of portrait, which is the skull, the rhythms, which is the muscles, and as they relate to that, the skull, it would then be the planes. And so all three of those play a very heavy role, and you need to kind of study those, or I would suggest studying them individually until they're heavily committed to memory, and then obviously apply them and use them forever. Practicing diligently and regularly so that you don't forget the use of them. So that means constant, refresher courses in life drawing and things of that sort. Even if you're a working professional, I would highly recommend that you don't let it fully lapse for any significant amount of time, because your hand will get lazy, it will get sloppy, it will get out of shape, just like you would if you were in tip shape as an athlete and you just chose not to go to the gym anymore and thought, well, I don't need to work out anymore, I was in shape once. So you just got to maintain that. I mean, it's just something that becomes part of your career, part of what you do for a living, is the maintenance part of it, which is, I don't think a lot of people want to hear that, but it is the truth of it, is that you will need to kind of maintain. And the old saying, I think it's a Greek saying or a Latin saying, but it's once you have it up, keep it up. I don't know how to say that in Latin, but it's once you have the skill set, it's easy to maintain it, it's hard to get it back. So just a little bit of work and persistence and just discipline will allow a lot of grief. If you let it lapse too long, then you're going to have to get it back again, and that can be a lot of work. And I've done that once before in my life, so I kind of am aware of what it feels like. So I try not to take extended periods of off, because it does just hurt getting it back. It's just really demoralizing in a way. I'm also thinking of Andrew Loomis. He's a big, I'm a big fan of his as far as teaching people how to draw and see spatial relationships. He doesn't use a rhythm grid like Riley as much, and he's not quite, I think in that way Riley was very unique, that he just such a beautiful lyrical way to navigate form. But there's a lot of great hard fundamentals that are found in like the head drawing and drawing the head and hands book from Loomis. So if you don't have that, I would highly recommend picking that one up as one of your more staple references on head. Along with John Vanderpool's, drawing the human figure, which actually has a lot of, I use it more for the head information in it than I do actually for the figure, although it does have some really wonderful figure information as well. But you can see the grid is just there for my guidance. It'll quickly disappear and I'll find it, and it'll disappear and I'll find it, I don't know, hundreds of times or 50 times, or I don't know, throughout the course of the painting. So it just gets me off on a good leg, it gets me off on the right foot, and then I can go ahead and get in there and start to get really cool, sexy looking brushwork and brushmanship. But right now it's more about logistics than it is about anything looking. You want your drawing obviously to look stellar, and I do agree with Richard Schmid on the idea that every phase of your work should look like it should be hung or could be hung, the lay-in, the first stains, all that. So I do think you have to go in with a very sincere interest in doing something good. You don't go in and just kind of bumble your way into it, do a sloppy lay-in, then I'll clean it up later, and then you do a sloppy first, I'll get that a little bit later, and just keep kicking the can down the road. I mean, you can really find yourself getting into really lazy, lackadaisical type patterns of working that way that can later kind of bite you in the rear when you're going up for those high-end finishes that you'll want to obviously go to as you get, and consistency, which is absolutely essential for any kind of professional endeavor in the arts. Is it's one thing to be good every once in a while. You got to be really good all the time. So it's something you should keep your mind on or aware of, is that consistency is the last thing to come, and intuition is usually a part of that equation, because you have to become kind of intuitive with your knowledge base in order to be able to work consistently and quickly. And intuitive means an awful lot of work. You don't become intuitive at anything first time, second time, third time. You have to do copious amounts of repetition. And that's why our school is built on that premise that you repeat classes, you repeat concepts, you repeat disciplines over and over until they become somewhat intuitive. at which time you still need to maintain them, but the heavy lifting's kind of over. But then you're usually moving on to something else. So it could start with head drawing, and then you work into figure drawing, but then in figure drawing you realize that the torso and the arm and the shoulder girdle are just as complicated as the head, for God's sakes. You know, the pelvic section is just as complicated as the head. The upper quad is complicated, you know, upper leg, complicated as the head. So you have all these layers that need to be studied in a similar manner. And so you end up with cycles, reoccurring cycles, which I've spoke about before in training, the training video at the beginning of this month, where you study repetitiously, but you also study in a cycle where you rotate in and out of different disciplines constantly, hitting them up and then re-hitting them up and then leaving them for a while and then coming back and hitting them up again later. And we do that in anatomy is one of the better places you can see that real cycle, because it's so overwhelming and daunting that you can't just stop and absorb it all at one time. You can only absorb bits and pieces of it. So you maybe work on legs and arms for 3 months and you take a class. And then that class is over, and then you take the torso front and back, but you're not doing the arms and legs as much because you're now focusing on the torso front and back. So obviously the information you got on the arms and legs are going to atrophy a little bit. They're going to get a little bit rustier, but they're way above what they were before you took the class. So now you're better. But a year from now, that class will come around again, and it would behoove you to be in it again, because then you'll basically do that cycle again. But you'll have done a lot of life drawings. Hopefully, you've done a lot of other work. And that way you bring up all areas of your study simultaneously in cycles. So you have a cycle of head, you might be doing skull and rotating between skull, heavy skull and abstraction one semester, and then planes one semester, or you might be doing heavy drawing one semester and then heavy painting the next semester and then back to heavy drawing. So you're constantly going back and forth between these modalities of learning, and it's constantly keeping you fresh, keeping you from burning out, but also bringing up those skills to a really high intuitive level. And that's really the key right there, is that cycling through in and out. But then you've got to learn how to intelligently do that. You've got to learn how to screen books outside of class. You've got to learn how to take the right classes in the right sequences, more or less. I mean, none of them are going to hurt you, but there's definitely a flow that would be ideal. And that flow usually is not able to be done by most people because they work or they can only come in on certain days. So the online school affords a lot of you an opportunity to actually go through the program the way it was intended. That's the way I had designed the curriculum and laid it out, was the way I wish the school could operate. But even here at the Sticks and Bricks, you know, you still can't do it that way. You get maybe 1 out of 1,000 that can do it that way. But people still get good time and time again, even going out of sequence. So it tells me that it's not absolutely necessary, but in an ideal world, there would be a nice flow that you could go through. But no one's in that ideal world, so only a handful get to do it that way. But you should still have a structured curriculum, I think, that you can introduce people to, so that they have an ideal of what they could do. And again, like I said, if you're online, you can go ahead and do it the way it is. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and just keep going. And then maybe do some streaming or something at some point to get more extrapolation of the information, or getting to see the actual tracings and getting to watch us fix them. And that would be very helpful as well. So lots of different modalities of learning you guys can do and look forward to. Today really is just more about us closing this month with a lot of demoing. Since nobody else is mic'd up except me, I'm probably going to be the one gabbing. And I'm most known for gabbing the most anyway, so probably be okay. But you know, occasionally we do have a mic going around, so if someone else has something to say, or if there's a question is asked that's pertinent to the piece they're working on, feel free to ask, and we can see if we can get over to that person and maybe field that question.
Jeff, we have a question from Edward.
Mm-hmm.
It says, hi Jeff, does a lot of thinking go behind color of backgrounds and clothing choices for your execution of an interesting portrait? And if so, how do you choose colors?
Well, I mean, a lot of times you have two choices. Primarily, you can do an analogous color, which means a color that's related to the color that's on top of it. So if it's red, you could use a muted red or a different red underneath a red. But I like to a lot of times go with the complement, which you're seeing me do here, because she has a red scarf on, and I'm going with dingy, or I'm going with an azo green, which is kind of a staining green, kind of a very transparent green, and then I'm going with some olive green, which is one of my favorite greens. And I'm just putting those opposites underneath it so that when I lay the red on top of it after the stain has set in, it'll allow the eye to vibrate off of that. Those complements have a tendency to vibrate visually. So optically, a lot of times you can get a little bit of electricity, a little bit of kind of pop, push, some kind of nice, balance energetically or also optically out of complements. So I'm a big fan of using complements. I use them probably the most out of all the relationships in color. I'm not a formulaic colorist, as most of you know, and so therefore I'm always bending color according to my whims, according to my gut feeling, and again, I know that's a lot of people say, well, that's not easy to learn. Well, color is learned predominantly that way. If you're trying to learn it another way, chances are you may not be very geared towards learning color, and you may never be a good colorist. I mean, I'm not saying that you give up, but I'm just saying color is mostly an intuitive thing based on some theory. And some people would argue, vehemently with that comment I just made right there. But again, most of those people are not phenomenal colorists. Now, it just is what it is, And so with color, you want to use your instincts a lot. But again, just using a little bit of rudimentary. When you get into actually thinking of it like, the tertiary relationship, all these different relationships, it gets so confusing. You can't even figure out what paint to mix together. You can't even figure out what's going on. And it just turns into ho-hum, non-inspirational color. Now, if you want to do more monochrome, or more tonal, type painting, like Zorn or even Sargent a lot of times, or some of the more wonderful tonalists, I think that's one of my favorite types of painting. Quite frankly, even more so than sometimes than color. So whether you bend color well or not, abstract backgrounds, abstractions of background can be done thousands of different ways. I mean, you can look at people like Jeremy Lipkin and the way he handles it, very conservatively, but with these nice stains, and then he kind of chops into them and lets the underpainting come through and creates this kind of mosaic of broken, splintered shapes. You can look at how Richard Schmidt does it, and with his abstractions of color. You can look at, one of my favorites, Nikolai Fashin, who's a Russian painter who is one of the best layering painters probably ever of color, and getting color to vibrate off of it, very much like a watercolorist. He uses oil a lot like a watercolorist does. So all these are options, and I think the main thing is to, when you're watching someone like myself, you're going to see this go through a very watercolory stained phase where there's going to be diluted colors. Sometimes I'll throw in a color just for the hell of it because I think I want to see what it's going to do. I don't know. I like my painting to have some mystery, and the process of painting to have some of that retained in it. Otherwise, it just becomes a formulaic process, which I'm not very concerned. I don't want to paint like that. I have painted like that. I've learned how to paint like that. I teach people how to paint like that online. I teach them how to paint like that at the school. So do our other instructors. But ultimately, when I'm painting for myself like I am today, I'm just going to open the floodgates and do my thing. And so just kind of watch that, enjoy that, and know there is a lot of knowledge underneath what I'm doing. It's not a Hail Mary approach to painting whatsoever. So I'm not just throwing up something at it and hoping something good lands on the canvas. I'm using logic, but I'm also using intuition, and I'm also using my gut, which is more the intuitive part of it, where I'm, more thinking, how would I like this to feel versus what I see versus what I know versus, so again, it's that equation I always talk about, part what you see, part what you know, and part what you wish you saw. And that's the equation. Everybody paints somewhere in that range. I'm either dominant on the front end, so some people paint predominantly what they see because they don't know much, right? So they don't have an option to make up stuff, so they're not going to paint what they want to see because they don't know how to. So they're going to be stuck painting and really relying on their reference, relying on the object in front of them. That's fine, and there's a lot of great painters that are painted under that, but it is slightly limiting. So if you look at, again, someone like John Singer Sargent had the potential to do either, but chose the first. He chose to paint mostly what he saw, and a lot of what he knew, and a little bit of what he wanted to see, but not as much as, say, like Frank Frazetta, who would have painted almost none of what he saw, most of what he knew, and most of what he wanted to see. And so he's on the back end of that equation. So both those are two good examples of guys that kind of bookshelf. Those, you know, are on either side of the aisle, and then you got an infinite number of painters somewhere in between. And a lot of it has to do with how much training they've done, how well educated they are, how intuitive their knowledge base is, how well their memory has been developed. And that's going to open up that last equation, which I think is where the magic exists, which is what you wish you saw. That's where you get the magical paintings. That's where you get the awesome. You have to have the first two. So when you start as a basic painter, you're going to be stuck in painting what you see because you just don't know enough. Now, the job of a good school is to give you a lot of knowledge so that you have that middle one open up, which means now you can paint part of what you see and part of what you know. And then, and only then, and most schools probably won't take you there, is you go into that realm of soulful painting and mysterious painting and magical painting. And that's where all the fantastic painters that I love reside. And that's where most of the great painters reside, in that domain. But they had to go through the first two to get there. And even if you got stuck in the first two, you could still be a very proficient painter and probably make a great living, right? There's not many magical painters. There's only handfuls of them, not many. So, but try for it, you know, and by all means, you know, work in that direction. I'm going to take a little break, and I'll be back jibber jabbering in a bit. Thanks. That was a mouthful. just going to go ahead and continue doing the stains. We just got done from a little break. Everybody was just kind of meandering around. So I'll just be bringing it up. I'm not going to talk as much for a while. I'm just going to paint for a little while. Just enjoy watching. Again, if something comes up that you don't understand or there's something really pertinent that you want to ask, then go ahead and feel free. But most of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, within reason.
Brush are you using?
Oh, would you? Gist. Oh.
Usually use a hair dryer with this. You miss that.
You miss it?
Yeah.
To speed up.
It really does assist with everybody make such a terrible racket. No way.
Well, it's pretty quiet in here, so it actually probably be okay. I mean, no music. It was a bummer, but that's the way it goes. E, did you bring any palette knives by chance? You probably don't use them that much. I just didn't.
I don't think I did, but no.
No, it's okay. I forgot them. If you got one, that I might want to use it a little later, or I can always run at break time down to get it or something. But. Oh, sweet. Cool, thanks. So again, the two major ways that you're going to work is like, kind of like I'm doing here, which is kind of like a, I wouldn't say, it's kind of like a glorified paint by numbers in a way. You're just kind of going in and you're going around, you're doing wet into wet for sure, and you're going around that drawing, and now the drawing's gone, and now all I have is mass. So I am now working with mass, but the original drawing helped me to find the location of it. So I wasn't just, again, starting with an eye and radiating out from it. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with doing that. It's just a little more challenging for those of you who are newer to portrait painting, and I think it's okay, but you don't want to go in and promote that too early on in someone's development. You want to give them a couple other options. This one's a little bit more heavy on your drawing chops being pretty strong, and that's what we encourage at the Atelier is extremely strong drawing for that reason, you know, because when you all prima type situation like this, you're going to be relying heavily on it. So again, I'm just getting the scaffolding I'm not worried about sexy brush strokes. I'm not worried about things looking really cool. I'm just getting basic placement.
You're right, Bob. That hairdryer would have been annoying.
The clicking was bad enough, right? Fortunately, that comes and goes really fast.
Tell us
So
what the clicking was for. It's looking cool.
just scatter the little stars all over. You don't paint those in with a white or right.
Yeah, that works.
It just
That worked.
it gets totally random and works a lot better. So now we'll go back and you see I've got stars in the mountains here, so that's going to have to be fixed up.
Luckily it's gouache and it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
It just again, the eye will go in and out of focus. It'll be all of a sudden blurry, and then I'll hit a few hard edges, and then it'll come back into focus, and it'll go back out. So it's a process of tearing the painting down, building it up, tearing it down, building it up, until ultimately the crescendo, which is that last layering, as you work your way up to that. And again, some artists will bumble their way and fumble their way into that. Other ones will do it almost like a beautiful dance or an orchestration. I can only imagine what it would have been like to watch Sargent build up a painting. It would have been quite poetic, I'm sure. It wouldn't have been a bumbling, stumbling mess. But then again, you will see someone like a Soroya or someone that probably is more like a bumbling type up to the finish, and look at the amazing results that he also was able to get. So it's not so much about my way or the highway. It's just, it's more like saying, hey, these are options, and there's good painters doing all of them, and you're going to have to find your own way of bringing up a painting, and whether that's going to be highly finessed, or is it going to be a little bit more like, find it in the mess or whatever, I mean, and it's all good as long as the end product looks great. Who cares? I mean, to me, it's all semantics. But again, when you're teaching somebody, you've got to give them things to hold on to, because you can't just go, just kind of do whatever you want, everything's good, and that's not a way to go about teaching. So we give you perimeters, we give you rules, we give you concepts, and you take those concepts with the idea that someday you're going to break them. Probably. Or you're going to reverse engineer them, or you're going to come in and utilize parts of them, but you're not going to be dogmatically using them. And that's how you want to teach somebody. So once you get good, a lot of these concepts will be very pliable, but they're quite rigid when you're learning. And they should be, and they need to be, because it's just too much freedom is going to cause a lot of problems. So one thing I always liked about our atelier was that my premise behind the way I originally designed it, and it was kind of out of necessity really, but was that you would train people from within the ranks of the school, and those people would become your teachers, and those people would become solid in this process, so therefore you're not confusing everybody every 2 seconds with 42 different cooks in the kitchen telling you 20 different ways to paint, which is fine once you're brilliant. But trying to get brilliant through that is a nightmare, and it doesn't work very well, and usually just confuses a lot of people and creates a lot of politics within the ranks of the different modalities. My method's better than yours, mine's more efficient than that. That one's not very. And then it becomes like more of that kind of a mentality, which I don't think is ever conducive to anything other than fragmenting the environment of the institution of learning, or whatever it is. Wherever it is you're going. So right now I'm just kind of, again, hitting broad clay-like areas of generalizations in this painting. So I'm generalizing the values as I see them, squinting down, looking at them, and blocking them in a large block-in format. Again, just not too concerned about the values being perfect, the edges being perfect, just placeholders. Respectful of the drawing I created, but not rigid, not uptight, not overly concerned about losing it, not being, just so there's a nice little, again, a little sweet spot in there of just being careful but not too careful, responsible but not overly responsible. So it's just a constant, I think, moving between these concepts and really learning to navigate them efficiently and intelligently, and also just enjoying that part of it. The lay-in has a certain charm to it, that once it's gone, you're kind of in the next layers, and maybe a little tiny percentage of it will be retained, but a good majority of it will be gone and gone for good. And it's just a process. And so you want to look at these processes as really just stages and steps towards the finished product. And they're not overly precious, but they should be done with respect to what they are. So when I look up at the model, Matisse, she's a wonderful model. The skin is, I'm making it a little richer. You know, I'm richening it up a little bit. It looks great up there. Part of what I'd like to see is it being a little richer. So I'm using that part of my equation, and I'm actually inventing and manipulating the color harmonies to make the skin tone a little bit richer. Somebody else might say, no, I just want to keep it exactly the same way. There you go, you know, as it is, and it's all good, and there you go. It's always nice to have options, I think. I mean, if you had to tell somebody, you know, would you rather have lots of options or only one option? I think anybody would say, you know, it'd be nice to have a bunch of options and then be able to selectively choose them according to the situation. We're using a predominantly warm incandescent light source, which causes the shadows to appear slightly cooler. That doesn't mean ice cold, doesn't mean blue. Cold is a relative term relating to other things that you're comparing it to. So when you say something's warm or cool, warm and cool relative to what should be part of that equation. Not just this is a warm color. It's warm in some contexts, it's cool in others. It really depends on what we're comparing it to, what we're putting it next to in the painting. So that's where color starts to become more pragmatic, a little bit more logical, is you need to think about what is this next to. If you look at your palette and say, well, it looked good on the palette, but it doesn't look good on my painting, it's because it's maybe next to something different on the palette. And the relationships are different there than they are when you put it in a certain position on your painting. So we always want to be respectful of the fact that color is relative, and try not to make it, you know, so when someone blanketly says, oh, that's a cool color, I say, well, not necessarily. I mean, yeah, out of the tube, I guess you could relatively say it's a cool, in the blue family, it's colder than this, but next to this red or next to this yellow or next to this, it's cold or whatever. So we always want to think about that as part of the equation as well. E, any questions coming through or anything happening? Okay.
Jeff, this is a question from Paul Callahan. He's asking about animal books, and might be a Jeff and Tom question. What kind of animal books would you guys study from?
Yeah, I'll let Tom take that one if someone wants to cruise over there with the mic, you know. I mean.
So yeah, animal books. That's a great question. The thing with animal books is there's a lot out there, and they're all kind of good at something specific. So you kind of need to group them together for your different needs. Joe Weatherly, he's a fine artist, a gallery artist, has a wonderful animal book that's great for construction. It breaks down the form in a very easy to understand kind of way. There's the Goldfinger book to animal anatomy, which is wonderful as far as anatomy specifics go, but it's very dry. It's a really dry, kind of flat diagrams, so you don't really get a lot of form off of those. But if you pair the Weatherly book with that Goldfinger book, you'll get a lot of information with both of those, kind of cross-referencing them, using the Weatherly book to build out your forms, the Goldfinger book to address specific muscle groups. And then if you go ahead and look at anything by Tara Whitlatch, she has a couple really great books out there. She's a concept designer, primarily for Lucasfilm. She did a lot of the stuff for the Star Wars prequels. But Tara Whitlatch is a great wildlife artist, and her drawings have this wonderful volumetric feel to them. Everything feels like it has a three-dimensional form, like it has a weight to it. So if you use her musculature drawings in conjunction with the Goldfinger drawings after using the construction of that Weatherly book, you're in good shape. But it is kind of an art to kind of learn how to navigate three different sources and kind of piece them together. So just bear that in mind as you kind of go into it. Hopefully that answered the question for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of good books out there on a lot more than you would think, you know, on the.
We also have a question for you, Bob.
Uh-huh.
What are you painting? And tell us about it. That's what we're getting a couple people talking about.
Okay, yeah, this is according to the text underneath my drawing that I did last night. Well, first of all, this is a science fiction, it's going to be a graphic novel eventually. I'm working on designing all of the ingredients. This is it all takes place 208 light years out from Earth in the year 2742. This is the planet Uptal 7, and it's 12 light years away from the nearest humanity. And they're mining really exotic minerals out here. There's 15 of them on the fringe of our arm of the galaxy. And they're about to get attacked soon. So what I'm doing right now is I'm developing all of the environmental considerations and sets for each one of these different places. And so they're mining a thing called boral at this place. And it takes 60 days at a quarter of a light year per day with their light pusher drive systems to get to the nearest humanity. It takes 60 days. So give you some idea of what the absolutely horrifying isolation must be like out here. So right now I'm starting with the underlaying, putting in a few areas that are going to be light, and I'll get back and start to work into the structure. It'll look similar to this. And I worked out the lights in Photoshop, and there's also a ship flying through this thing, similar to the one that's sitting on the pad there. So that's basically it. It's the Blunt Force Saga, and it's a lot of fun, and it's turning out to be a bigger nightmare than I ever dreamed.
And this is a project that, if you go back, I think 2 weeks on the channel, you were doing a painting for that as well?
Yeah, and things are on Instagram all the time about this. Just kind of updated concept sketches, and we're still working through that in concert with the text that goes with it. So it's a big project, and it's not going to come quick, but almost nobody but me cares. So that's a great relief to everybody right there.
It's looking cool. So.
Well, it'll come. It's just you have to with these. This is called indication, is what I'm doing now, where you're not really rendering stuff. You're making people think you're rendering stuff, and so it has to be done in discrete little layers, and it eventually starts to come together. I've done a lot of architectural stuff, so this part, the nebula was worrying me like crazy, and it's not my best nebula ever, but considering the situation under which, normally I'm using hair dryers and I work with laying flat on a surface. I'm not doing any of those things now, so you're working with 1 foot on a banana peel when you're doing it this way. So hopefully it doesn't look too much like a banana peel.
And we had a few people asking earlier, this is gouache, right? And this is kind of your preferred medium for painting?
Yeah, I mean, I love oil as well, but it's there are certain things that when you're trying to get things done in a hurry, oil is probably not my best choice. It could be for some people, but for me, it's gouache is the way to go. And I started out using gouache when I was really young, and it's kind of stuck with me. Oil is a lot easier to work with, but the speed consideration and the fact that you can work right over the top of things immediately is very attractive to me. Okay.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Quick question for you. We've got someone asking about attacking that far eye in three-quarter portraits and how you handle the perspective and those.
Well,
kind of
right now
things.
it's kind of wonky and out of whack because I haven't really gotten back to it, and I just it's got a really subtle placeholder. You just got to really know how to draw the orb of the eye and how to wrap a lid around it properly, and that usually will come more through drawing lots of little pairs of eyes and stuff academically, studying from again anything from reference online or whatever. You can find all kinds of great reference now. But it's just tearing the eye down, and then basically, yeah, you're going to see me do it here in a minute, and I'll explain it more when I do it. Kind of pointless to probably explain it right now in abstract terms. A lot more practical once you see it starting to happen. But you got to get the lid to wrap around the orb of the ball of the eye, and the ellipse of the eye has to match the other ellipse and be generally in the right location. Easier to find the eye that we're looking at, the right eye, than it is the far eye, because we can use the old rule that you follow the angle of the nose, the width, parallel back up to that angle that you chose, and the width of the nose will give you that eye, and then you build out from that. But this one, the true duck's always hidden underneath the nose a little bit, so you got to kind of more guess at that one as far as where it's coming out. And right now I don't really have her nose type established. That far eye, like I said, is barely a placeholder. So just watch as it comes up. I think it'll make a lot of sense when you see it starting to come up. It depends on how accurately you want to paint it, how intensely, if you're painting it more like a Bouguereau or something, then it's definitely going to be honed in more photographically. If it's painted more impressionistically or more indication driven, like my dad was just talking about, where you're indicating the illusion of an eye, the detail but in order to do that, you really have to know almost more about the eye than someone who's just rendering it. It sounds funny, but indication's harder than rendering, because you're having to take what you know, dumb it down, well, not dumb it down, but to indicate in a more simplified manner. In order to know you need to really know it intimately in order to know how to simplify it. Because you have to know exactly what it is you're leaving out, what it is you're actually, you're actually editing out. So again, I'm going to take a break with everybody else here. I don't want to get into that eye from memory right now. It's just not a good thing to promote or tell people to do, so. Okay, so now we're back, and I'm just going to continue on. They'll be working in and out of form, still working to get rid of all the white of the canvas, which is one of my first goals in any portrait painting, is to eradicate the white spaces. Not with the exception of the I'm not working on stained canvas, so obviously we have some in the peripheral that I'm not too concerned about. I'm talking within the head itself. Is just get it in a big, nice, safe piece of clay that I can start pushing around and pushing in and out of, and getting my shapes to start taking form. Then I'll just continue to ratchet and ratchet and ratchet until it comes into hopefully a really beautiful painting. And again, it's a life painting, so you're looking for training yourself in spontaneity and learning how to eliminate information. Because to me, any kind of 3-hour painting, anything under 3 hours or even thereabouts, is going to be an indication painting. Which means I can't, I can render a bit, but it's not about rendering it. It needs to be about indication. And so it's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff going on. You'll see me jumping around a lot here because I'm going to be trying to pull up all my shapes. When I was looking at one shape, I'll see another one that annoys me, and then I jump over there to fix it, and then another one catches my eye, and then, and so that's kind of just how I work around. And the goal is really to, again, bring the drawing or the painting up together, and then I'll lock down a feature, one of the eyes that I think is going to be the dominant eye probably. Then I'll bring that up a little bit further, maybe a 3/4 finish, and then I'll go around and bring the other features up. And then I'll go back and do that last finishing touch on that one, and that's usually towards the end of the painting. It takes you right down to the wire, and then you never really get a chance to go do those other passes on everything else, even though you probably wanted to, or you would like to have gotten a little bit extra time on them. But you got to really prioritize in life painting what it is that you want to go after, because just time's burning, and it's not as relaxed as it is when you're working at home in the studio. But the at-home work, a lot of times, just gets a lot of the spontaneity beat out of it because you just have too much time to ruin everything, So there's a certain kind of impetus and balance that you want to learn with life work that you bring into your normal work that allows you to keep them spontaneous and fresh when you do your more finished, longer gallery pieces or longer efforts. I'm going to move this eye in a little bit. I think it's a little out far, just a little bit. And I'm going to go back over and so now I'm the reason I jumped to the other eye immediately is because I'm trying to match the two up, looking at the elliptical feel. of the two, and which one needs to change, which one needs to be altered. I think both need a little work. She doesn't have that big of eyes, so I made her eyes a little larger at this point, but that's okay. Again, the painting's always going to be ebbing and flowing in and out of carving and cutting and changing and making it bigger and making it smaller and just flowing back and forth. And that's just the way a painting comes up. It is what it is. So you can't just laser it onto the surface, you can if you're doing, digital, you have different opportunities, but in traditional, in all painting, whether it's digital or traditional, is going to be a layering process. With this, you can't shut off layers. You can't turn a layer off and then look at what's underneath it or do this or that. You're stuck with, allowing certain parts of certain layers to remain if you want to, and if you cover them, then you've kind of gone past, and then you can't get it back. You can't get that look back. So from that standpoint, way more unforgiving than digital. Way more responsibility in the actual layering process that you have to really be accountable for. Sometimes an eye like that, I'll look at it and I'll just say, it's too uptight, so I'll just kind of put my finger in it and I'll or scrape it with a palette knife. I might go like that and then go back and start repainting on it. It's not uncommon for me to do stuff like that. And then a lot of people say, well, it was looking pretty good. But yeah, pretty good isn't going to get me where I want to go, So for me, it's a matter of I will sacrifice whole paintings if it's necessary to get a better growth out of what, because these are growth exercises. These are not anything other than that. Occasionally, yeah, you sell them. Occasionally, they go in galleries, whatever, if you do a little outstanding one. But that's not the impetus. That's not why I go into doing it. I go into doing it just to learn, to train, to keep my hand fresh. And it's just an exercise. It's like going to the gym and just doing a workout. Nothing. You're not playing in the Olympics, or anything. You're just going and preparing to play in the Olympics, and you got to do your 7,000 hours in the gym, on the way there.
Hey, Lucas. We got a question for you. Got some people asking what you're working on, man.
So this is it's gonna be a half page for an RPG manual, an upcoming game. I'm doing about a dozen of these sketches. Just kind of, these are little quick black and white studies. I don't do a whole lot of finished digital work anymore, but in this case, it's going to go faster because there's so many of them to do. It'll go faster, and I can work on them if I'm out traveling around or. But yeah, it's kind of fun. Just trying some new techniques and.
Do you typically do your comp work in digital, right? Because it's fast and you can kind of edit quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's stuff I can do on the roads and be productive while I'm in between places. But all my preliminary work's digital just because it's fast and easy to make adjustments. But I definitely prefer painting in oils or gouache. But yeah.
Right on. Cool.
It's one of these awkward things here where you got to work from the back to the front. You can't do the stuff that's out in front right away, so the whole thing looks like crap most of the way till you get there.
Had somebody ask earlier if you'd work on any Star Wars. I don't think you had, but could you tell us a little bit about what you've worked on in the past?
Oh my God! Have we got an hour and a half? We do actually have an hour and a half.
Convenient.
No, I started out in aerospace. I started out in advertising in Los Angeles, out of Art Center, and then, that was kind of a mixed deal. I had a pregnant wife and needed some money and all that kind of stuff, so I needed to get a salary job. Came to San Diego in aerospace, stayed there for 9 years. It wasn't as grim as it sounds. Doing portraits, paintings of admirals and stuff like that. Paintings for executives' offices, walls, and engineering drawings turned into renderings of airplanes that didn't exist yet. All kinds of good training stuff, but very well-rounded postgraduate school, I guess you'd call it. But I got, over the course of time, I ended up going into advertising for another 9 years, and then after that, a guy said, "You don't do architectural renderings, do you?" And I said, "I don't see why not." And that turned out 3,000 renderings later to be what has really kept me mostly alive. Did a lot of aviation stuff for American Airlines for about 5 years. Terrific client. Just had a great time doing that. Paid really well. Everything was good about it. And let's see, I've done, then I went into just aviation art as a fine art for a while. Believe it or not, there is a market for that. Then other things started to happen again, so I got out of that. Got into galleries with oil paintings. That went fairly well, but, got bored with that after a period of time. So I have done everything under this crazy sun, and I would hasten to note, okay, not all that good in any of them, really. But then maybe I'm harder on myself than I should be. I don't know, but probably better than sitting here and flying my own flag. It's been fun to do lots of different things and not to get pigeonholed. I really have enjoyed that part of it. And I find that you can actually get, after you've been doing this as long as I have, it's not that you're so good, it's that you're so good at burying your mistakes. And that of course is a skill set unto its own. And that's a really valuable one to have too, because it probably doesn't make any sense to those of you out there, but it will.
Does anybody want to talk about time management skills and how they handle all of the work-life balance that comes with this stuff?
I mean, I've been talking a chuckload of it lately, so I mean, if someone else wants to, I think I talked about it on that how to train one we did earlier in the month. We talked a lot about multitasking skills and just, there's no easy way to tell somebody how to balance everything from having a family to having a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, and then trying to balance how much time it takes to be an artist and how self-absorbed that particular career is, I think, it's hard. Quite frankly, it's just really hours. So I'm not trying to deter anybody. I'm just saying that the reality of it is it's a multitasking nightmare. I mean, and some people are good at that naturally, and some need to learn that. And if I always tell people in school, I mean, if you're here, people ask how long does it take to get good, and I say, well, what do you have to learn? You have to learn how to multitask along with everything else, and how to be patient, and how to have perseverance, and how to have Yeah, so I mean, again, multitasking, it's all about, it's the ability to distill down very complicated things into a hierarchy of what is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever, 700th, and line that needs to be done. And then being able to have the, I think, wherewithal and the intelligence and also the discipline to follow through with the plan of action that will allow you to get through that hierarchy and then to not get lost in the overwhelming aspect of that. And some people just don't do that well. They just are not built for multitasking. I happen to be really, really good at it. I'm lucky. But I've also worked really hard to get good at it. But it's a skill that sometimes you possess just as part of the inherent quality of who you are. Other people, again, have to learn it the old-fashioned hard way, which is just get into a lot of trouble, get in over your head, have to try to work through it. Again, balancing, it's a balancing act, right? And especially if you want to incorporate into it staying healthy, eating well, having a good relationship, training in your art and being a good professional. I mean, we're talking each one of those areas alone is a behemothly difficult thing to do. But you start having them interact with each other, and you better be really on your A game with a balancing act. And that's, again, they do a piss poor job of teaching you in high school and college. I mean, college forces you into it because all of a sudden you have deadlines and you have like a final, and then you have midterms, and you have this, and you have 8 classes you're taking, and you've got to probably work a part-time job, and then you starting to have a relationship. So they kind of inch you into it in school. And I think that's a main reason why people, kind of stay in school and stuff, is because they have to learn that, When you get out in the real world, then you just get that just lands on your doorstep, and then all of a sudden you got to deal with it, in real life terms, as far as mortgages and babies and everything else you could think of. And I don't mean, again, I'm just painting, this is the reality of it. And all of you, I mean, how can you not, I mean, I don't know how you couldn't sit and think a few steps ahead and say, yeah, that could be a lot of work. But a lot of people do bumble into having kids and stuff without thinking about it, apparently. It seems like it, So I think, when you start thinking about the big scheme of things, give things a really good, solid, think them through all the way to the end. I remember listening to Alan Watts talk about this, and he's a philosopher, and he talked about, really thinking through what you want and what you're going to do all the way to the end game, all the way down to the very end. And a lot of times, people just do not do that. They don't follow it all, the train of thought all the way down the rabbit hole, So if you're going to have again, I want to be a professional artist, I would like to have this, I'd like to have that, then, okay, now get a game plan. How? Well, you're going to write out a mission statement, you're going to write out goals on paper, you're going to get a calendar, you're going to start. And I talked about this, so go back and watch that, How to Train to be a Successful Artist, but also the YouTube on the beginning of this whole process, where I did it like 3 or 4 weeks ago on training. Because I talk about this, I talk about this exact question. So maybe you haven't seen that one yet, but that would answer a lot of what we're, what I'm talking about. How's it going, Robert? Thomas, how you doing?
Not bad for a painted at the bus stop job.
How's Logan doing?
What's that?
How's Logan doing?
Oh, he's doing great.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Super excited for summer coming up.
You guys got any big plans? I mean, has he got any plans?
Oh, a couple trips.
Is he going to do any summer camp or anything? Is it too
Yeah,
early?
we do the zoo camp, rock climbing camp too.
Oh, that's cool.
He's excited for those. I think that we're going to try and hit up at least one national park somewhere in there.
Cool.
Trying to squeeze one in.
Did you guys do Zion and Bryce?
No, we haven't done
Canyonlands right now? Those are pretty close. All those are good. And they're all right next to each other.
Maybe Yosemite. We haven't done Yosemite yet.
That's the only problem hard with it when that's so crowded unless you really can't stay anywhere. I mean the campgrounds are full and when it just gets out of control down in there.
Yeah, that's the absolute problem we're running into.
That's the
We
biggest
kind of
one.
weigh the pros and cons of trying to squeeze in the trip there.
Yeah.
And by the time we get through it, we're like, let's just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that Canson illustration board?
it's Crescent.
Crescent?
Crescent, it's the good stuff. And maybe I should say a couple of things about how this all happened. If you were here when this started, you noticed there was already an image on the sheet of illustration board. And this is something that I only figured out how to do about 4 months ago. So a little bit late to the game, but it works. And what I do is I do a drawing on tracing paper, which is it's down here if anybody wants to see it. But I did it cold last night. This
like
whole
that.
concept, if you can
The background on
so
that was
graciously call it a concept, was about an hour to get the whole thing drawn. And I started out with the thought of just having a galaxy plunging into the horizon line of a sloping hillside, and everything else just kind of went zing bazoom, And so what I did then is I put the drawing in a scanner, 11 by 17 scanner, and took that into Photoshop, fixed it up. Then I peeled the top layer off the Crescent illustration board. Start with an X-Acto knife right at the edge, one of the corners. Start to peel it back. This only really works well with the really expensive board. It's rag finish board. It only works well with that because it's got a very thick top layer. And so you pull it evenly all the way across the top, and then you take a big round cardboard tube, and you grab the edge and you start rolling it around, and you can peel it right off in one piece. Sand the back till it's smooth and it lays flat. Then I fed it through my wide body printer, printed the image on it, sprayed it with adhesive this morning, and glued it back onto the board, and bada bing, bada boom, as they say. And it's something I just figured out, so it saves all the heartache of you watching me draw this thing, which would bore everyone to death, including me. And it also makes my workflow go a lot faster now. So I only have to, and I can actually use 3D drawings from SketchUp and print them as a draft, which is a very pale line. And I can print it right on the watercolor paper, and so I don't even have to do an in-between drawing from my SketchUp model on architecture. So there's a lot of neat tricks that you can do that certainly weren't possible when I first got into this business. But I'm no wizard in tech, to be sure, but I've been using computers for a long time. And I got more equipment in my office now than color printer would have had when I started in this business. Complete print shop wouldn't have had the equipment I have. But you have to really constantly search for things that will save you time, and saving time at 2 o'clock in the morning is so sweet. Okay, getting there. I gotta get myself a better brush to do this. Okay. I stuck with. And there it is.
What happens when you get old?
Are you wearing glasses now, Ian?
Yep.
I got a sad text from him the other day. It's a sad selfie. It said, "I'm old. I've been wearing his glasses."
No, I started getting really bad headaches, and I was like, why am I getting these headaches? I'm not a headache guy. I avoid those. And then I realized it was because
Actually, you're right.
I needed glasses.
There you go. Well, that's a class of people for you. Headache people. I'm not a headache guy.
I don't think anyone's a fan of headaches.
Yeah.
Well, no, but there's headache
That
people
one
and there's
guy.
not headache people, you know. Brian's a headache guy.
I'm getting used to it.
Yeah.
Not so bad. So what are you working on, Eric, right now?
A portrait of the model.
So clever.
Wet end wet portrait. Not anything special, but a lot of stuff that Jeff was talking about earlier on in the class. I started out with a loose linear drawing, and then started massing in my lights and darks with a neutral warm, and then started blocking in the colors as I see them. I don't take near as many chances with colors as Jeff does. I pretty much stick with what I'm seeing for the most part. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Nothing too tricky.
Silence is deafening, eh?
I know. That's why I usually gavel so much. It's just like, you want to hear something. Yeah. Dude, like, yeah, and the music helps immensely, but for obvious reasons we can't. So, I guess we could have gotten like some public domain classical and just like played it over and over. May have even been worse. Well, today is about 25 years of being here, right, Joe?
Yeah, it sure is,
You know?
man. It's been a long road. Erik's been here for most of it, and obviously my dad. And many.
We couldn't get some Vangelis on the Desperado soundtrack.
Oh, that would have been good. Yeah.
Throw back
well,
to the old days.
yeah.
The one CD player.
The one CD that made it the whole way, I think, was probably either Desperado or Vangelis, Blade Runner,
Yeah.
which was a great soundtrack. It still is. Yeah, it was a good one.
It's very way.
Yeah, I know. Go way back. I mean, we do go so far back. People are like, what are they even talking about? And it's funny how you're just, like, the school kind of started from such humble roots, and then to see it go as far as it has, and how many people have come out of it that have gone on to great things, and just how amazing this little school is. Pretty crazy, pretty cool.
What was it that they played up at CAI all the time?
I don't know, Glenn had like one, I think, Mozart, tape, not even a CD, and it just played. That's all they played, and it was either that or you had Neil Boyle doing Dixieland, which I don't know.
That's what it was. It was the Dixieland. That's what I remember you talking about.
I mean, Dixieland music for freaking the whole class forever, and it wasn't like you were going to argue with Neil. I mean, he wasn't going to have it. So, I don't think he would have heard you had you even argued with him about it. But yeah, it was pretty horrendously bad. That's why I used to always laugh when people would complain about our musical choices, and I'd say, "Oh, you have no idea how good this is." Yeah, a lot of what the school, I guess, originally, for those of you who don't know a bit of the history of it, I mean, it did start in a little place down in San Diego called the Gaslamp Quarter, which was kind of a little historical district in San Diego, downtown San Diego, and it was back in the early 90s, and I was probably in my early 20s. I think I was 22 at the time. And I was trying to get something going because I was trying to continue my training, and I didn't have anywhere to go. There was nowhere around that was like where I'd gone to school up in LA, and I was frustrated with how unprofessional the models were at these colleges, junior colleges and stuff, and how the teachers really weren't teaching anything, it didn't seem like, and the students had attitudes, and the models couldn't model well, and the lighting was terrible, and it was just a kind of a free-for-all. And so I reluctantly kind of started. I had a young student in I taught a guest semester at Palomar Junior College. I was 21, I think, and I knew a lady there that my dad had introduced me to back when I used to go to life drawing class when I was about 16. With him, I'd go in and we would draw on Sundays and stuff occasionally, and she gave me an opportunity. She knew that I'd gone to this school up in LA, and she saw the growth that I'd made and how much this technique. She was really amazed by it. So she asked she said I could come in and do a summer, like a class in the summertime. So I did, but I had no degree, and nor did I want one, and so I couldn't really teach at the college because they required that you had teaching credentials or whatever, and so it was probably the best thing that ever happened, because then what happened was one of the students that was in there, actually, a young guy, happened to have a building downtown that he kind of looked after. He kind of lived in the upstairs part of it, and it really wasn't that desirable for people, from a marketing standpoint. So he said, "Hey, I think I can get you a cheap space down there. And I jumped on it and took this little space. It was probably the size of like freaking broom closet or something. I mean, I think we fit 6 people in there, and then at max, and it was packed out. And my dad and I built the benches in my garage, and we just kind of started this little workshop classes. And I kind of threw my hat out and just put some there was no internet at the time, so you really couldn't get a hold of anything. I didn't have any money for advertising, so it was just a slow grind, getting one person and then keeping them and then getting another person. And I think it took like a good 6 years to become at all profitable, or maybe 8. I think at the time I was living at home with my folks, and I was just trying to keep training, and I just was trying to keep my skills from atrophying. Really didn't intend to start a school, had no intention of it ever happening. But I found that I was really good at coaching, really good at, took my sports background and really applied what I'd learned, and it felt like that was a really good fit, was to inspire other people through discipline, and then to teach them how to multitask, like we were talking about, and to teach them the principles of this Riley method as best I knew it at the time. And I was a little rough with it. I mean, I was okay, but I was probably a little early to be teaching for sure. But nobody else was around doing it. There wasn't a lot of competition as there is nowadays. I mean, it's just, there's so many people trying to teach stuff now. Some that should, and some, quite frankly, that probably shouldn't be. But, you just kind of, it kind of organically grew. And the goal from early on was to get people good in the actual environment, and then allow them to, if they showed the right temperament, personality, and everything, then they would become teachers, and then I would then be able to move on and give them the classes I was teaching, and then I could build the next layer and the next layer, and it kind of happened organically like that over a course of now 25 years. But I mean, it was Erik was he's been with me 20 years. I think Lucas probably 12, 15, probably somewhere in there. Is that how long? Yeah, 15 probably. Yeah, so I think all the teachers now are 15 plus years, and they really, the way you became a teacher was really you not only loved the craft, but you showed exceptional skill and loved the craft and could verbalize and wanted to, kind of pass it on and kind of take pride in passing this lineage on to another generation. And so it really was a rare thing to build a school over such a long period of time from within the ranks of the school itself. So none of our teachers were ever hired really outside of the ranks of the school, with the exception of my dad, who obviously, comes in with a ridiculously specified and specialized kind of special aspect of teaching composition and perspective and things of that sort, picture making, which is really wonderful. So anyway, 25 years in the making, and continuing to push into new realms of, the internet and doing, streaming and bringing it to more people from other parts of the world, which is so cool to see people come in now from other countries, from other places, and having, I mean, if you would have told me that 25 years ago, I would have just laughed. I would have just said it's impossible. It's just not going to happen. Again, with no it's hard to fathom a time without the internet. There's a lot of people I'm sure that are listening right now that can't even wrap their head around that. They grew up with it. They have always been around it, and it seems so common to be able to reach out to so many people from so far away. But there was a time when you had to advertise in magazines. It was really expensive. There were no real avenues to get your work out there. It was very difficult to get people to know that you even had a school, and or even there was an option to learn this stuff. So it's a beautiful time for everything. It really is. It's one of the most amazing times in history. But the school has managed to maintain a kind of strong stance on traditional values, traditional skill sets, and we haven't really chased down the digital and not that we have any problem with it. It's absolutely one of the most phenomenal things that's happened for artists. But what you see happening now is that a lot of schools are jumping on that bandwagon because they have to keep up with the church of what's happening now kind of mentality, and they don't want to look obsolete. So they're pushing into having these programs where the foundational skills have not been passed on or aren't able to be taught, because it takes a very unique person to be able to do that. Obviously, like we were just mentioning, at the school here, it takes, I don't know, 5 to 7 years before you are asked to teach, and then maybe another 2 years of co-teaching, and then you're teaching somewhere around 10 years in, and there's no way you're going to get people to do that in a school system. So what you end up having is just a very limited amount of people that can really walk people through this process. And yet, so the schools are very heavy on these more tech-driven modalities of learning now, which there's nothing wrong with, but the fundamentals are lacking and missing, and therefore the applications, in my opinion, aren't being used to the fullest extent. And then you occasionally see people, the Jamie Jones and the Craig Mullins and people like that are traditional painters doing digital to a phenomenal level of pushing the envelope of the technology and really using it the way I think it should be used personally. But that's just my opinion. And but that's where you see, I think, the best, most amazing work being done is by the ex-traditionalists a lot of times. But to get somebody traditional, it takes 10 years, not 10 months. Learning Photoshop maybe takes 10 months. If someone's, good showing you and you're just dinking around with it, and then you're off and running. So you get this illusion of foundation, but you don't really have a true foundation of the skills necessary to really, design at an elite level, to be able to do all these things. And so again, we kind of put our hat, I just always stayed in the traditional lane and determined that would be a great place to be, because it's rare and it'll attract the people that are digital, want to be digital artists. They'll learn their traditional, and then they can go off and be digital, and that's fine. That's the way it should work. If you choose to do that because of speed and efficiency and all that kind of stuff, and then that's a wonderful thing. But if you're hamstrung by it, if you're kind of only able to use a tool, one tool or something, it really limits your range. It limits. You're and not only that, but just the enjoyment factor. I love the tactile sensitivity of the paint. Now, maybe the next generation won't feel the same way. I don't know, but it seems to be that they still do. And we get time and time with these a lot of millennials in, a lot of young guys in that are doing wonderful, and they're really eating it up and really loving it, and showing me that, there is still hope that the traditional arts will always be a part of it. I in my heart, I know that's the case, but there's part of you that doesn't really know, with how fast technology is changing things and how things are moving. You just don't really know if it's going to stay that way, for future generations. We'll see. But anyway, our school now is really, I have no intention of really incorporating a ton of digital. Like I said, all of our guys use it. I dabble with it a little bit here and there, but I'm more just really pushing forward into the, rendering and different aspects of the traditional media. And the school kind of reflects that.
That was the LED one. It's battery powered.
So now I'm doing on this, I'm just refining shapes, starting to kind of got it covered, and I'm kind of working on my highlights now. I've worked my way up to my highlights.
Me too.
Anybody else wants to chime in, they're more than welcome. No, I'm not really using. I don't use a lot of medium anymore. I've gone through phases where I have, but I find that at this particular point right now, I don't really use a lot. You know, and there's no particular reason. I mean, I'm not anti anything. It's just I feel like the paint has enough linseed in it. It moves fine for what I want to do. I prefer drier paint now for the style of painting that I do. So, if anything, I'm always trying to get the paint to kind of set up a little bit quicker on the surface, and I usually use the surface to do that, not necessarily a medium. So I'm more concerned with surfaces than I am with anything else. They seem to be the one that affects my paintings the most as to how they look, how the enjoyment factor, all that stuff, the efficiency with which I work. It's the surface, not the paint. It's the paint brands, not the brushes. It's more the surfaces. I spent a lot of time experimenting with lots of different surfaces. How's it going back there, Robert?
That's the benefit. Oil paint doesn't run out of batteries.
Yeah?
It just never ceases to amaze me when I don't look like a complete jackass. I always take things on that are way past stupid, difficult for the time frame I'm working in.
I think that might be where I got it from.
I think it might be.
Little break. Yeah.
I unmuted? So at this stage of this particular study now, I'm just going to be basically tearing the painting back down again. So I like to have a little bit of tiles and brushiness to my paintings. I prefer that they're not like incredibly smooth everywhere. It's not hard to do that look, but it's just not the look that I like to go after in my portraits. So I like to keep them a little bit more gestural, a little bit more, for lack of a better term, probably soulful. Not that really tight paintings can't be soulful, but I prefer, again, painterly paintings. So I'll fight to get that back in the painting. So, but right now what I do is I am in a rendering phase of the paintings. That means I'm tearing down a lot of those tiles, smoothing strategically out some of them, and then leaving some of them, or possibly recreating them if I remove some that I accidentally remove and don't want to. And that happens all the time. I mean, you just, when you're working quickly and efficiently, you're going to make mistakes. That was a kind of a contradiction there. But if you're working that efficiently, you probably wouldn't be making mistakes. But you're moving faster than you probably should be. And as a result, you're going to kind of run through some edges that you wanted to maybe preserve. After the fact, you go, oh man, I wish I would have had that back. So you might have to go rebuild up that section, do a little bit of repair work. And again, it really depends on the level of finish that you want to obtain. And that's up to each individual. There is no perfect, a start for one person is a finish for another, is whatever. So you really want to finish it to the level that you feel like you've said what you wanted to say. And at that point, the piece is done. Now, again, that could be at any number of different levels of finish. So I like to a certain look, and I'm kind of striving for that. And I kind of, over all the years of painting, I've become familiar with certain things. So I'm kind of looking at it going, okay, this is kind of unfinished for me. I'd like to get that a little bit more dialed in. That looks pretty cool. And it's just more of a gut thing. I like the way the abstract background is playing off of the head, the softness of the head, the grittiness of the background. So we have a nice variation of texture. I like that as well. I've found over the years that I like variety and texture, as well as color variety. I mean, so I like variety in all things. So that's kind of one reason why I have a hard time locking myself down to certain things, is that I'm always enjoying so many different aspects of so many different things. I like to sculpt. I like to use gouache. I like to use ink. I like to do brush inking. I like to do fantasy work. I like to do representation. I mean, it just goes on and on down the road, and it is who I am. I mean, I've kind of used to think it was a problem, and ultimately, I mean, it is, it's the way I'm wired. So for me, I've just kind of embraced it through teaching, because teaching allows me to do all those things. So I can then exercise inking every once in a while and get my fix for it. And then I can go over and do gouache and teach that to another person that might actually lock onto it and do only that, or go into inking entirely. And I can then live vicariously through their successes and them. So it's kind of just over the years. I mean, I think it's what's allowed me to teach for so many years at a high level and not burn out of it, because it's a demanding thing to do the way we do it, and it can burn you out. It takes a lot of your own creative juices, the best of them, and you use those to leverage other people past their issues and stuff to get them good. So you're using a lot of your own personal energy to really do that, and that's not something that everybody wants to do or can do. But so anyway, right now I'm pretty happy with the state that it's in. And I'm just kind of, I haven't used a lot of palette knife. There has been phases in my career where I was very heavy on the palette knife. And I do like certain strokes that it pulls that is hard to get with some other tools. But I think like anything, it can be very much overdone, and then it doesn't look good anymore. So it's like color's only it's only good when it's used in such a way that it doesn't become too much. When it becomes too much, then it doesn't mean anything anymore. So once you might put down a stroke and say, oh, that looks wonderful, I'm going to put that 15 other places, and now it looks terrible, because you kind of overdid it, for lack of a better. So now I'm going in and again pulling out of this scarf that she has wrapped around her head. I'm just pulling some abstractions of little color notes, and trying to get some variety yet again that helps to balance the smoothness of the face. So we are going into peripheral areas of the painting, meaning areas that are kind of to your out of your peripheral vision, out of the focal point, and utilizing those to give variety to the painting texturally. Now, when we do that, we want to make sure, or I want to make sure that I don't do that and it distracts from my center of interest, which is the face. And then within the face, it's the eyes, and within the eyes, it's one of the eyes. So we narrow down our center of interest to more and more into one aspect of where we really want the viewer to hone in on. And in this particular painting, it would be this eye out here. I could have chose either one, but that's the one that seems to me to be most logical, and is surrounded by the most information, and just feels like a no-brainer. So I'm kind of utilizing that as my center of interest in this painting. And everything else must be subordinate to it or secondary to it, and I can't allow it to, or should not allow it to, trump that particular thing. So a lot of times at the atelier, we do have Sunday workshops. Usually, we had one this morning, and it's usually with the full-timers at the school get it for free. So they come in, and I usually come in just to try to get some extra practice for, get my chops up and keep them up. So it's kind of, again, it's like gym time for me. It's like art gym. So I come in and do a little portrait painting for myself, and I don't teach during that time, but I'm there to lead by example and hopefully influence the kids, and get to know them a little bit and all that kind of good stuff. And I really feel that that's one of the things I enjoy most about this environment we've created here, all of us, is that it's the camaraderie and the love amongst the students and the friendships that are created that will probably be lifelong are really special. I know all of my teachers are my best friends, and they all came out of this program, and so I have that to thank for it as well, is that some of my best friends came from this grand experiment that it started 25 years ago, And so it's cool. I mean, that's one of the things I think that you really can't put a value on is, when you're in a school of this size, which is quite small compared to the bigger art schools around, that you have that intimacy intact. And it's something you just can't, the bigger you get, the harder it is to maintain that. The harder it is to have that vibe. So now I'm loading up my highlights. So now I'm getting into some pretty juicy strokes, where you can actually see the ridges of the brush strokes. And I use a bristle to put that down rather than a sable, because it allows those brush strokes to really show their life. It gives it a claw mark. So, Yeah, we were gonna go like a normal class, and if you finish early, that's fine. But we got until 5:30, so we got about another 45 minutes or so. If you guys, I'll probably be done a little early. I think, but. So again, now I'm looking at all the areas that are at right angles to the light source, and that's where your highlights are going to be hitting. And since my light source is always from above in these classes, because we want to have really obvious shadow patterns for the students to get used to using, and getting used to manipulating edges and navigating edges and value control, we don't want to use north lighting and things that are really subtle and difficult. Although it's beautiful lighting, it is kind of a luxury to have north light studios. Not a lot of places do, especially here on the West Coast. East Coast seems to be a little bit more prevalent. A lot more large old warehouses with bay windows, although I'm sure those are probably going fairly quickly and turning into places that really wealthy people would like to live, I would imagine. Whereas they used to just be, secondary, so all the artists would end up residing there. But Eric, how's the camera angle on mine? Does it look good?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, cool. back towards me a little bit. Cool, thank you. You finish yours?
Enough for now. Enough punishment for one day.
How do you feel about it?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Came fairly close to what I had stuck in my brain going into this thing. So. I'll probably do a couple of little tiny touch-ups when I get it back to the studio, because they are intended to go a little further than just here. So. Okay, you little stinker.
Get a trademark?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
It
goodness.
takes a whole bunch of time to actually get the thing. And then when you finally get to that point, then you've got either 60 or 90 days to make the first money off of the trademark,
Where they?
to legalize
They
it, or
yank
else
it?
you lose it.
No way.
Yeah, so it's really a more complicated process than I ever dreamed. And they don't exactly smile on you using the word trademark on something. They haven't given you a trademark on it. You can still use the copyright.
Yeah.
That's okay. You know,
Yeah.
that you can do. But none of that registered R or TM on it. None of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's not set up for the little guy, I'll tell you that.
Shocking.
Shocking, isn't it? It's set up all right, so you'll be. So you'll-
Shocking that it's an uphill battle for the little guy.
Yeah, we could run it up to, you guys, anybody want to go all the way to the 5:30? We can run it to 5. If you guys want it, I mean, we're almost 10 minutes. We can all squeeze 10 minutes back out and call it a day. Does everybody sound good with that?
It's fine with me.
Let's do it. Yeah, we'll just,
It's only so long people will hang
Yeah.
around anyway.
You'd be surprised.
I would.
How many people like to just chill and hang out and watch?
I think it's so cool, the little gimbal thing. Isn't that nice?
Thing.
I think it's fantastic. Sneaking in. Thanks, E.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
Well, I actually managed to get that, and just, you know, the husband and wife family, they all say, they got things, they know it's taste cost, and I can only go up.
Oh, fall in the paint, you big dummy.
So you talk me down where I
I know. Oh, good grief. Both of them, not just one. Oh God, you couldn't plan it out that good, could you, huh? Okay. Jesus.
Luckily, I didn't kill anything. I did the awkward stuff, but it was, they were saying, was like, oh, we'll start this and, you know,
All right.
perfect. You know, so, you know, I made it easier for nothing came on the back. I was like, I managed to wrap stuff up right before, and then stuff started coming in.
Ready? Okay, you guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us this whole month. It's been really wonderful getting the chance to do these Friday Night Lives again, and getting all the guys together and everything. It was really nice, and I hope you enjoyed. We covered a lot of stuff. We'll continue to do more. I just want to close in saying thank you so much for you guys' support. Tell friends and other people about what we do if you want to see more of this. And also, one thing we're going to be doing is on Tuesday, we will be going live with the coupon code for basically, I think it's going to be $129 for the whole program, for as long as you want to stay in that, for the online, for the specialty, for the painting, for the drawing, for the library that goes along with the streaming. So it's a lot of content. And we haven't done a deal like that since we went live 5 years ago. So it's something that we just wanted to do as a thank you, but also as a celebration for the 25th. And we just relaunched the site, completely redone. So the forums are redone, everything's redone. It's an awesome site now. It flows beautifully, and it should be a lot more even user-friendly experience for you. So we really worked hard on that over the last 6 months. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you down the road for some more Friday Night Lives, and hopefully we'll see you either in the streaming program or the online program, or maybe out in the Sticks and Bricks. All right? Take care. Cheers.